Here, 10 August 2016, right here, right now, I'm going to show you how to make or how to set up a commercial worm bin that you can buy at a store. In this case, we're talking about a Worm Factory 360. This is the way it's set up. You need a container, something to capture the liquid. The way these bins work is gravity forces the liquid to go down into a container. You have a little spigot here to get rid of it. It's called leachate. For instance, if you were to glance over here, you would see my commercial worm bin underneath the stairs. And I want to show you what this stuff looks like. Do you see that orange bucket with the black top? That's not black top, that's liquid manure. That's leachate. What it is the water goes through the horse manure, which is the bedding and the food in that commercial incubator, and it eventually comes out that spigot, and it's liquid manure. It could have pathogens in it. It could have E. coli that's dormant. I don't want it to come to life, so I'm not going to put it in my vegetable garden. I don't suggest you do it either. So we're going to come back here, and we're going to get started on showing you how to make this worm bin. Again, it's got legs. You can move it around. It's light. It collects the leachate that comes down at the bottom. Then you have trays in it. The trays have holes on the bottom. Allows the worm to go up to the food source. And so let's set it up. First thing we need to do is put it down. In this little fancy worm bin, we have a worm ladder in case the worms fall through the holes, which I guarantee you they will. Then they have this little ladder to climb back up and get back through these holes into their bedding, into the food source. Does it work that well? I wouldn't think so. So I have a way to avoid that from ever happening, or at least eliminate it from happening. I go out to Home Depot and I get this fabric, weed blocking fabric. It's got very little holes in it. You can probably see through the light through it, and it does a very good job of keeping the worms on top of the tray and not allowing them to pass through. And I only use this material on the bottom tray, because if I use it on the tray above it, the worms wouldn't be able to move upward to the food source. So I cut this to the exact dimensions of the tray. I place it in there, so I'm not going to do that right now, but this is just for demonstration. I always keep the fabric on the bottom tray. Next thing I do, I take shredded newspaper. I got this I got this Panasonic little shredder out of Staples, and I shredded up a newspaper. This is way too dry. If I'm holding this and I'm squeezing it, water should be coming out of it and it should be sticking together. But the problem with using newspaper is it can mat down too much, so it's best to mix it up with cardboard, something to help aerate the material, the substrate. The cardboard also has like the corrugated section in between it, and it's got glue that the worms absolutely love. They thrive on it. So what I'm going to do next is put this over the fabric. I'm going to spray the crap out of this stuff. And then I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to spray it again. And I'm going to turn it over again. I'm going to spray it again. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to spray it again. And when I'm satisfied, I can hold this and squeeze it, sticks together. Water's coming out of it. I know it's fine. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my worms. Let's just see if I can show them to you. See my worms? Just a little handful of red worms, red wiggler worms. They're not that big. You know, night crawlers are 6 to 12 inches. These are 2 to 3 inches. They're small. They can go. I can make them double in size by feeding them a grain diet. And they'll get rounder, and they'll also grow longer. And then what I'm going to do, just for display purpose, I'm going to put them on a piece of paper because I don't want them to get lost in the shredded paper. And the next thing I do is I put my worms down, not with a newspaper, but I just put the worms over the shredded newspaper. And after I do that, then I get my organic food source. banana peels. They love these. They love pumpkins. They love watermelons. They love a whole series of food, but they don't like spicy food. They don't like citrus food. You want to keep meat and dairy products out because it's going to attract critters to your worm bin that you just don't want. So I put that over the food source. Now worms only got a real tiny brain, and their only purpose of their brain is to tell them to get out of sunlight. So I help them get out of sunlight by wetting a newspaper and then really get it wet and damp, and then I put it over it, and that gives them the darkness, it gives them the moisture and the security to eat the bananas and turn it into worm castings. So there's other materials you can use. This comes with like coconut coir. It comes in this brick. I wouldn't use it personally. You know, it's a nice material when it's damp, but it seems to dry out, and when it dries out it just turns like dust, and I don't see how the worms could survive in that very long if it's that dry, if it dries out that quick. So I have my own homemade system over here. Just a tray to catch the liquid. No holes on the bottom. I got another tray with holes on the bottom. Ventilation on the side. Again, one goes in the other. Now I take the newspaper, I put it here. I take the worms, I put it on top of it. Actually, first thing I do is I take this fabric here, weed blocking fabric. I put that down, then I put the newspapers over it. I wet them really good, then I put the worms on top of that, then I put the bananas on top of them, then I take wet newspaper and I put it over it. Then the next tray, all I do is take some newspaper, shredded newspaper, I put it in there, and then I put a banana in it. I do not use any of that weed blocking material because I want the worms to move up into the next tray where the food source is, and if that fabric was in the second tray, it would block them from doing that. So I only use that weed blocking fabric on the bottom tray to keep them from falling into the liquid and drowning. Okay, so we pretty much covered how this works. The way it works is the liquid through gravity always goes down. It comes out the spigot, goes into a little bucket. It's called leachate. It's not called worm tea. You can throw it in your backyard. It's not going to do any damage or anything. But I wouldn't use it on any vegetables, especially that I'm going to be growing to eat myself. This is a commercial product. Purina has makes dog chow and cat chow, and Purina Mills makes worm chow. It's a grain, and you can see what it looks like. It's very fine, very small. Worms have a very small mouth. They don't have teeth, and after you put this down on their bins, you have to wet it and make sure it's moist. It's important to have a very moist living environment for them. 65% moisture. You want to see that moisture squish out of your hand, drops of water. That's how you want to keep it. And this will make them grow larger. It will make them grow longer. You can, depending what you're using worms for, whether you're using them for compost or whether you're trying to breed them to sell them, you know, you have different reasons for using different diets. So I grow them in horse manure, chicken manure, cow manure. I grow them in straw and leaves and newspaper, a whole bunch of different substrates. They work best, you know, in horse manure, cow manure, because actually cow manure, because it's got a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 25:1, and that's the perfect ratio that the worms really love, grow, and thrive in. So I try to keep my bedding in 25:1 nitrogen to ratio. Is there anything else I can tell you? Worms don't have any respiratory organs, so they breathe through their skin, and I can take these worms, I can put them in the bucket of water over there, and as long as I'm supplying oxygen to them, they'll live for a little while. They'll live for a few days. But if there's no oxygen, then they're going to drown overnight. They don't have any eyes, they don't have any ears, they have chemical receptors, and that's how they find their foods. So we want to keep salt or any sodium out of the worm bin, because that interferes with their ability to find food. It also dries them out, and a dry worm is a dead worm. Worms live between the temperatures of 40 and 80 degrees. 60 to 70 is ideal. As long as the sunlight's not beating down on them, they'll live in ambient temperatures of 100 degrees. They'll even live down to 32 degrees and below. I've had them survive quite well, surprisingly. But you can't let them go for long periods of time like that, because then you're going to have a die-off. So that's pretty much it. It's just a stackable system. You keep the fabric on the lowest tray, and the trays above it, you just put bedding and food, bedding and food, bedding and food, and the worms will come up, and as they come up, they separate from the worm castings, and then you take that tray and you just put it into your garden, and your plants will love you for it. And that's all I got to share at the moment, because I got to keep this video underneath 15 minutes.